the Jet Setting Wealth Advisory Podcast, where your financial journey takes flight with David T.U. As an airline pilot and financial expert, David merges the aviation industry and wealth management to help you navigate today's complex financial skies. Each episode features expert insight, blending personal stories with essential financial strategies. We ask that you fasten your seatbelts and sit back as we prepare for takeoff. Our destination, your financial empowerment.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Jet Setting Wealth Advisory Podcast. I'm your host, David T.U. And today we're very delighted that a true trailblazing Erika Armstrong, who has been in aviation for over 30 years, almost in every corner of the industry, has joined us today. Erika's journey began behind the front desk of a small fixed-based operator, aka FBO, and took her all the way to the captain's seat of both corporate jets and commercial airliners. She's flown 28 different aircrafts in a wide range of operations, including charter, corporate cargo, hazmat, that's hazardous material for civilians, and even air ambulance, under both Part 91 and Part 135 operations of the FAA regulations. She served in all three seats of the Boeing 727-200 and brings an unmatched breadth of perspective on flight operations. But Erika's contribution doesn't just end in the cockpit. Pardon me. And we'll cut that and action. Both Erika's contribution don't end in the cockpit. Today, she's an influential aviation educator, instructional designer, and vice president of business development at Advanced Aircrew Academy. She's also the author of the best-selling memoir, A Chick in the Cockpit, which is currently in screenplay development. In today's episode, we'll explore Erika's career evolution, her take on aviation education and leadership, and how she's using her platform to shape the future of flight to the next generation. So welcome, Erika. This was a long-winded introduction. Glad to have you here.
Thanks for having me, David. I love being able to geek out with somebody else who's been in the industry for so long. So I'm looking forward to talking about it.
All right. So let's get right to the questions. Your career takeoff and your flight path, aviation journey is an incredible dynamic. Your aviation journey has been incredibly dynamic. Can you share the origin story and what sparked you to love flying, and how did you evolve into such a multifaceted aviation career?
That's a great question. And I actually found aviation by accident.
Okay.
I was attending the University of Minnesota, and I was 3 years in, still didn't know what I wanted to do. All I knew is that my two jobs were not paying the tuition and rent. So there was an opening at the front desk of a little airport called the Flying Cloud Airport, just southwest of Minneapolis. And
that's where I went to school and where
really?
I took my private pilot. Yep, I'm a Minnesotan myself.
You are?
Grew up in
we'll
Minnetonka. Yep.
So you know Flying Cloud Airport. So yeah, I got a job at the front desk working at, it was Elliott Beechcraft at the time, and
Sure.
I knew nothing about corporate aviation. I didn't even know there was a phonetic alphabet. I still remember my first day sitting down, and there's all the Unicom radios, and a pilot is calling in on Unicom. I'm like, I have no idea how to respond to this. So came into this little industry. Still, even to this day, a lot of up and coming pilots don't know a lot about business aviation. They always are focused on the airlines. And so I didn't know about this world, and I just started working there, meeting the characters, learning about the business side of it. And I just fell in love with it. I took one lesson next door back when they were doing free discovery flights.
Sure.
And knew that's how they start the addiction. So one flight, and the guy let me fly and he talked me through a landing. I'm like, this is it. I got off that airplane. I knew exactly what I was going to do.
Okay, fantastic. So you've flown a lot of different airplanes, from charter to cargo to commercial airplanes. What was the pivotal point in your career that shifted your perspective and what it means to being a pilot, an airline pilot?
Oh gosh, so many pivotal moments.
Okay.
You know, when I look back on like what is the tipping point that kind of propelled moving forward? Gosh, there's so many, but I think once and this is a little controversial, but I agreed to sign a training contract. So for pilots,
Sure.
The hardest part is getting those hours, especially now
Sure.
that you need 1,500 hours. How do you do that? So I was flying King Air's air ambulance, every night was a different night, 2 o'clock in the morning, middle of winter in Minnesota. You know what that looks like.
Sure.
Lots of lonely hours, but I wanted to get into the jet. And the company was penny pinchers, and I'm like, well, is there some way that we can work this out? And they actually marched me down to the bank, and we signed a loan for my training to go get type rated. And I had to agree to work there for 1 year. If I quit early, I had to pay for whatever was left on the loan. I
Sure.
know a lot of pilots think that I'm selling my soul by doing that,
Sure.
but I mean, I understand that aviation at the end of the day is a business. So I understand the other side of the cockpit door. And if somebody's going to invest tens of thousands of dollars in me, the least I can do is continue working there. So when I think about what kind of propelled me forward, getting that type rating and the citation, that just opened up other doors, because when I was not flying for them, I was salaried. So
Sure.
when I wasn't flying for them, they would sell me to other flight departments. And so I would be walking into Part 91 corporate flight departments, and they'd have a first officer who was sick on any given day. And so I'd go over there, and what I didn't realize what was happening is I was learning a lot about safety culture by walking in and flying with all of these different pilot personalities and understanding the tone and the expectations and the variance. It kind of set me on the trail of training and trying to understand really what does safety look like. So I've been
Okay.
able to take that knowledge and bring it back into the educational side and try to understand, the pilot brain going through accidents where a 16,000-hour pilot makes a mistake. It's easy to find the mistake, but I go beyond that. I want to understand why. What in that environment at that moment made that person think that. So it's a long sequence of things that happens. And for most of us, we're not going to know that moment is happening, but it does. So,
Sure. Human factors
yeah,
related to incidents and accidents.
yeah.
So you mentioned a couple things here. You mentioned 1,500 hours minimum to get to a Part 121 carrier to fly, even for the regionals. You've also mentioned a contract bond for earlier years when there was plenty of pilots. So let's talk a little bit about each of these. Let's talk first about dollars and cents. What are some of the lesser known financial challenges pilots face today, but especially during their earlier years that you can share with us?
Yeah. So I try to encourage, and I taught for many years at a university here. So I encourage a lot of pilots to try to get their time in a real world environment. Instead of grinding away as a flight instructor and getting your 1,500 hours, I try to encourage them to come into business aviation and get some experience there. It'll just make you such a better pilot. So, but coming into the business aviation side, there are so many more variables. Business aviation has done a better job of creating better schedules, almost setting it up like an airline. But if the economy turns, the flight department's the first thing to shut down. I've done things like I was working at a charter company, had a pretty good job, but I was lured away to another charter company, hired on as a captain on the citation, lots of benefits and all these things that were going to come with the job. They sent me to training. I had to go to the embassy suites and jump in the pool and show them how to open up the life raft, because we flew internationally. So I did all this stuff, and I'm waiting for my first phone call. The chief pilot calls, and I'm thinking it's my first flight. And he's like, "Hey, I hate to tell you this, but we just sold the airplane and you're out of a job."
Wow.
So
Yes, that's corporate.
in
Yes.
that part of your career, it's a lot of instability. So I've been furloughed, laid off. Even at the airlines, I was flying during 9/11 and instantly without a paycheck. We all got furloughed. We had no idea when we'd be flying next. So there's always this driving fear now that at any given moment, the job could be taken away. So I've always tried to have just some little side gig going on just in case, to help buffer that. If you look at the reality of our industry now, it's a lot more stable, and you don't see that quite as much.
Right.
You still see it in business aviation. Flight departments are constantly opening and closing, but there's still a lot more stability there. But I still try to encourage even my students coming in. I try to encourage them to study things besides aviation.
Sure.
When you're in it, you want to be in it. That's all you want to study. But I try to encourage them to have a little education on the side, because at some point, especially losing a medical, I got hit by a drunk driver a couple years ago, and just like that,
Ouch.
you're out of a job. It's a unique industry in that, for anybody else, that would be no big deal. But going to get your medical every 6 months, man, your job's on the line. What if one day you just have high blood pressure or just some minor little thing kicks you out of the cockpit? So always being aware of that, and paying attention to your finances in case that happens.
Excellent. So for new pilots today, there's often a trade-off between a college degree and flight training. They're both expensive. How should aspiring pilots or aspiring aviators think about that decision and the long-term ROI, the return on investment on that? What's your opinion about that?
Such a great question. And I think I might shock you with what I'm going to say, because I taught at a university. Okay. So I understand the absolute value of education. I think as a society, we're just a better people if you're educated. It
100%.
just makes you more tolerant. Even if you don't agree, it's just you have a better understanding of the world. And it's just getting a college education is more about teaching yourself how to jump through the hoops, self-discipline to get stuff done. It's not going to make you any smarter. It's just going to make you better educated. So
Absolutely.
as you know, the majors dropped the requirement a couple of years ago for a 4-year degree. You used to
Yes.
always have it. So when competition is tough, the bar gets raised.
Right.
We've got a huge pilot shortage. We still do. We just don't have a lot of experienced pilots. Tons of
Right.
people who want to be, but that's a whole other topic. But so I would love to see our society shift the value of that. There's a lot of jobs that don't need a college education. And I would love to
Okay.
see all those pilots being able to spend their money on better training. If we could divert
Okay.
all that money that they're laying out to take art history classes, and divert that into, even more just weird things, like more training on understanding your own brain and how you learn and how a pilot reacts under pressure, and more core foundational education, I think we would just be churning out better pilots. But our society, we really still benchmark with that college education, and unfortunately, it's still, you got to have it. So I've got both my girls in college right now, and I'm
Okay.
paying for all that, so I know the pain. But as an ROI over the life of your career, you still got to have it. And so I tell my student pilots, you don't have to go to $100,000 a year college. Just get that degree in any way you can,
Okay.
and pick away at it. There's a lot of online colleges that you can do. So go fly and just pick away at it. There's still power in that diploma.
So you went to Embry-Riddle. I went to the competitor of Embry-Riddle, University of North Dakota in Grand Forks, North Dakota. Would both have very excellent aviation majors. Would you recommend young people today that are looking to get into this field to work on a college degree along with flying as part of the curriculum?
Yeah, and you just mentioned the two very most expensive schools, which I love. There's a couple others. Actually, UND is pretty good, but there's a trade-off. So there's very streamlined flight schools and education. You're going to pay more for you, but you're also going to get into the career earlier. That's your trade-off. I went through just a Part 61 flight training school. I was working full-time, and I just had to pick away at my flight training.
Okay.
But I will caveat, I would not have gotten as far ahead as I did as quickly if I didn't work on an airport. We always talk about the cliche networking, but I tell you what, it is so important. A little old lady walked into the FBO one day, and I'm like, not in a million years, I think she was a pilot, but she was the organizer of the 99s.
Mhm.
And because I met her, she got me hooked up with the Red Cross. The Red Cross
Sure.
paid for the aircraft, and I didn't get paid for it, but I volunteered my time. But I got almost 700 hours of free flight time just because of that connection. So a lot of pilots who don't work on an airport don't see that value, and it just takes one right person to cross your path to get you set on the going a little farther and faster.
And it's important to position yourself in that environment where the opportunity can come, even if it's just a one opportunity that may come across.
Exactly.
I get it.
And I'll also mention, I took Embry-Riddle on an extension online classes. So,
Oh,
I mean,
okay.
I attended the University of Minnesota. I attended the University of Denver, graduated from there, and took
I see.
extension classes.
Okay, we'll cut off right there. Something happened with Erika, so we will hold off right now. I will keep the recording going. Okay, hang
I have
on.
Starlink
That's it.
every once in a while.
Ah, Starlink.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so we were we're not continuing. We haven't stopped the recording, so we're just going to continue. Let's talk about you online course at Embry-Riddle. You went to school at University of Minnesota, and tell us about the Embry-Riddle online course.
Yeah. Yeah. So I just want to quickly mention that I actually took my classes online with Embry-Riddle. So
Okay.
they've developed their online platform so much better. And even this is what I did when I taught at Metropolitan State University, is part of my role was to bring a lot of the content online. So our
Okay.
pilots could go fly during the day, take their classes at night during when their schedule allowed for it. So we had to redevelop on how we train and test. And I love that we're paying a little bit more attention to that, and we're doing a better job with our online training. So I love that that's another option for pilots.
Fantastic. You're the vice president of Advanced Aircrew Academy. Can you tell us about this organization?
Yeah, they've been around for oh gosh, 17 years now.
Okay.
And once again, we're using technology in better ways. So in the olden days, anytime we had to do our recurrent training, we'd get pulled off the line. You have to come in, and the chief pilot would read you the GOM and the op specs, and that would be your training. Now we've got 120 different topics on everything having to do with business aviation, you name it. And what we're doing is we're customizing it. So every flight department is a little bit unique in what they do, what they're authorized to, even for approaches. So what we do is we take out all the clutter and we streamline all that recurrent training and initial training for their business aviation pilots. So
Okay.
another great way of seeing technology changing and reshaping the way that we learn and work.
So they don't have to actually go into a simulator, or they just do the sort of extended or online courses for the ground school, but still, so it reduces their overall time being away from flying.
Yeah, it's the simulator is a whole other category, and they still have
Okay.
to go do all that. They'd love to
Okay.
find a way to get out of that. But no, every year you have to take general operating subjects, part of your approved training curriculum with the FAA. You have to agree to train on all of these topics. So we customize all that training. So instead of pilots having to come in, sit in an office, be away from their families, they can now kind of pick away at their recurrent training. Don't tell anybody, but I know they've been taking the recurrent training up at altitude.
Okay.
So yeah, different ways to create that muscle memory of training. It's, all the rules and regulations, again, they have to be tested on and trained on. And we've got an efficient way of doing that and tracking it. A lot of business aviation flight departments are on auditing programs. So we provide all that ability to easily audit training and keeping the industry safer.
And where is this Advanced Aircrew Academy located?
We're everywhere.
Okay.
So we truly are an online company. Our headquarters are in Atlanta, Georgia.
Okay.
But we have subject matter experts literally across the country and up into Canada. So
Okay.
our subject matter experts who help design and create courseware, they're out there flying right next to you. They're business aviation pilots, they're flight attendants, they're mechanics. And this is something that they do on the side. So that's why we can keep all of our content current. We update it every single week. Which is so important. So yeah, a whole new dynamic of training.
You're a fierce advocate for young aviators or aspiring aviators. What's the employment outlook right now for new pilots entering into this field?
Yes, and it's something you have to get used to because it's always a roller coaster ride. Always. We're always adjusting. And so it's a key indicator of the economy. It's watching the pilot hiring. So
It sure is. Yes.
for pilots, we can see it, we see it happening before anybody reacts to it. We can see that all of a sudden our schedules are getting packed. We're duty time up to the limits. It's an indicator like, oh, okay, we don't have quite enough staffing, and the problem with pilots, especially at your level, is how many years it takes to get a good pilot. There's just no fast way through it. I mean, I can sit somebody in a simulator and, for hundreds of hours, but that still doesn't replace that actual line time. I always laugh because in the simulator, everything breaks perfectly. It's yes and no, black and white. In the real world, airplanes fail in just crazy, weird ways. They fail in between. So every time I've had an emergency, it just doesn't go exactly like the checklist. So how do you train pilots to think beyond the checklist and understand? So I taught aircraft systems and propulsion. So I always think every pilot error is just a miscommunication with that pilot and the airplane. And the airplane is trying to speak to you, but we just sometimes misunderstand. We can't read the body language sometimes. So it's a huge disconnect on book work and actually training, not just someone how to fly, but to be a pilot. It's a whole other level.
Okay. So from your vantage point at the Advanced Aircrew Academy that specializes in business pilot, I should say corporate pilot training online, what industry trends there are emerging that pilots and the flight department, the corporate flight department, need to be paying attention to?
Yeah, the trends. So anytime the airlines are hiring, it affects business aviation.
Sure.
So the airlines have had the luxury of, after all these years of having business aviation flight departments put tons of money into these people. It's like $70,000 for a type rating now on some of the corporate jets.
Sure.
So the airlines have had all these experienced pilots come knocking on their door. So now that's not necessarily the case. But it's interesting how business aviation has adjusted and the incentives that they've provided now because of airline hiring. They realize, hey, I just spent $70,000 on this person. What can I do to keep them here and not have them go to the airline? So they've done a much better job of providing all those other benefits and having a schedule and creating more of an airline type structure. So I'm seeing a lot more people who actually started off wanting to go to the airlines and they're like, no, I think I'm going to stay here. So don't tell anybody, but
Wow.
I actually preferred the business aviation side. Now that I've done the airline route,
Sure.
I actually preferred the adventure of business aviation because every time I got in the airplane, I'm going to where the rich and famous are going. I'm staying where they're staying. I'm going to Aspen. I'm going to Telluride. I'm going even Maui in Australia. So it's
Sure.
a different personality, a different mindset to be in business aviation. You are dealing directly with the person paying for the flight. And that's another weird dynamic. So you have to have a little nuance. I've seen pilots that don't do well in that environment and because they're a little bit unfiltered. So
Understand.
the communication with the owner of the aircraft, there's
P's and Q's. Got to watch your P's and Q's.
exactly.
Etiquette is
Whereas
important.
you get to get in the airplane and shut that door and
Sure. Sure.
Yeah.
Best-selling author. The title of the book is A Chick in the Cockpit. Tell me about that. Give a little insight to it, and how did you come up with that title and what inspired you to write that book?
Yeah, it's a little tongue in cheek. So you have to remember, I started flying in 1988.
Okay.
The environment was different. I still distinctly remember when I was applying for jobs, people had no problem saying, we don't hire women. And I was okay with that. I mean, that was the environment back then. So I get it. And I have seen over the last 20 years, enormous change. I really have. Although I have to say, though, all of a sudden with this DEI conversation coming out in the news, it seemed like we just slid backwards 20 years, just like
Okay.
that.
Yep.
And it's
Sure.
so frustrating for the women in the industry. I don't want anyone to think that because a woman got to the airline seat that there was any corners cut. It's so frustrating because if anything, they've worked twice as hard to get there. So keep that in mind. But yeah, I think, I picked the title just to, just have a little fun with it. If you do not have a sense of humor, you cannot get through this industry as a happy person. You need to have it. You are working with people and that have strong personalities, and you have to grow some thick skin to be in it. So lay it on the table, let's address it, let's have some fun with it. At the end of the day, we love aviation, and who cares about the rest? So that's kind of why the title was picked.
Fantastic. And the content of the book is about you and the experience and the path that you took.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
I've been in the same book club for 22 years. And we were talking a few years ago saying we don't have a lot of books written from the person in aviation. We have lots of books about Amelia Earhart and all those trailblazers back then, but we don't often hear from the women going through this experience and what that looks like. So definitely want to bring people into the cockpit with me, show some challenges, show some fun, and just kind of what that actually looks like. I know people walk by that cockpit door and you wonder how they get there. So it's just a little taste. And then also some of the additional challenges that women have.
Okay.
I think entry into aviation, it's hard for everybody across the board. I actually think the challenges for women actually come later because, we still are the ones that have babies and tries to raise families. So I think we, at that point, is when we have a different set of challenges. So, but now you're already in the industry, you're invested in it. So you got to find a way to deal with it. So a
Okay.
little different perspective.
Fantastic. What financial myths do you think the public believes about pilot income versus reality,
Yes. They all
especially
think,
corporate pilots?
yeah, they all think we're making $500,000 captain at the airlines. The reality is, if you look at the scope of salaries, there's only a small percentage that are making those really big bucks. And man, those people have put in the years. They deserve that pay. And they also, a lot of them know how to work the system. I think a lot of pilots don't know how to maybe work the scheduling. They might learn, but there are different ways of making more money, being
Sure.
smart in that way.
Yep. Working your contract.
There you go. The one thing I think people don't realize right now is business aviation is actually, in a lot of regards, keeping up. So I've talked to
Okay.
several corporate captains who are making $300,000 and they're making and only flying about 10 or 12 days a month. So
Wow. Good.
that didn't used to be the case. Business aviation used to be a pass-through industry. The pay was super low because people knew that people were moving on. Over the last 10 years, I've seen the salaries increase significantly,
Okay.
enough to make you not even consider going to the regionals. Like, why in the world would I trade this Gulfstream for being based in Detroit and flying 20 days a month? So,
Sure.
and commuting. There are tons of corporate flight departments now. You can live anywhere and they fly you to where the airplane is.
Yes.
Whole different mindset, whole different structures, all the jet card services, all those types of quarter share companies have different schedules. So as a pilot coming into the industry, take a look around, see what they're offering out there. I think you'd be really surprised at what they're offering.
Wow. Fantastic. Do you see the trend of, because in the major airlines, there is a lot of attrition due to mandatory retirement age. Do you see those pilots that have retired from major airlines now going, that they're feeling great? They want to continue to fly because they enjoy it. Are they going into the business or the corporate aviation side after they retire from the majors? What do you see there?
Great question, because that is the weirdest thing that I've seen over the last year. All the questions I get via email coming in, it is that, especially when the retirement age was 62, and these guys are like, I feel great. Why would I hang it up now? I've seen a ton of them coming back in, but I'm also seeing some unique challenges because
Okay.
when you come back in, now you are responsible for flight planning, all the weather, all the
Yeah.
catering, and you have to load the luggage.
For toilet cleaning.
Yes,
You're the baggage handler. You're the dispatcher. You're
yeah,
everything.
you got to clean the honey pot. If
Right.
you've not done that, you have to be very humble to come back into business aviation because you really are kissing rich people's backside. And after years of having that disconnect with the people behind you, it is a different mindset. But
Okay.
I still see a lot of pilots coming back and just going, why didn't I do this sooner? They're having so much fun.
Oh, okay.
And as long as they're realistic with their expectations, a lot of them are coming back and just coming in as like a second string, a backup. I'm a right seater. I'm going to stay in the right seat. I don't intend to be a captain again at a Part 91. So it really is about mindset and attitude coming back in,
Okay.
and coming back for the joy of aviation and not, necessarily to make a ton of money again.
Okay. On that, what do you see in terms of the major airline pilots who've retired from 121 flying going into corporate aviation, Part 91 or maybe 135, where, you mentioned the word humble, their attitude to be humble. Do you see people, these pilots that are coming, adjusting nicely, or do you see a percentage, whether it's big or small percentage, just not willing to adjust in a different type of flying environment?
Yeah, it's a great question, right? Because pilots have a very specific personality, okay, and that's not going to change. So if you press me to and ask me, I would still say 80% thrive coming back in.
Okay,
They, they,
fantastic.
they do have to learn like 135 regulations if they come into that side, or Part 91, and what that looks like. It's a little different, but that's easy to learn that.
Okay,
So
yeah,
yeah,
okay. It's the everything else,
yes,
wearing multiple hats
yes,
in the corporate flying side of
yeah.
things. Okay. Share a story where mentorship or advocacy has helped a new pilot avoid a costly mistake, if you have any examples that you can think of.
Oh my gosh, hundreds.
Okay, great.
So I tell you what, so I had been flying for business aviation for 10 years. I'm
Okay,
flying Gulfstreams and Falcons and all the, high-end toys and stuff. And then I got hired at the airlines,
okay,
but I got hired into the flight engineer seat, right? So
okay,
now I'm in super old equipment. Now I'm not even flying. But what I'm doing is I'm sitting back there at the flight engineer station. Everybody ignores the plumber back there. But what I'm watching is all these different personality types coming into the cockpit and all the variables. So you very rarely fly with the same people. And so having the combination of all three of us, the variables were infinite. And so what I, I saw great captains, I saw horrible captains, I saw first officers who were so good, they didn't even realize that they were really running the show. And, correcting a captain and watching the ability to do that in such a way that it doesn't feel like somebody's correcting you.
okay. Mhm.
Yeah, I think for me at the time I was frustrated because I'm not flying, but I was learning a much more valuable lesson in watching how a good captain would just always be just gently teaching and giving you the backstory and deeper reasons why things are done, and just the joy of that person sharing instead of like nagging and picking. And there's a different way of doing it. So yeah, I think that was just a great opportunity to see that type of teaching moment.
Fantastic. If our listeners take away, are able to take away one key piece of advice from today's conversation, whether they're a pilot, parents of future pilots or future pilots, or professionals in high stake careers, what would you want that to be for them to have that one piece takeaway?
Oh my gosh, no pressure there. um,
Give two if you have. If you have.
I think now that I'm at this point in my career, I've been in aviation for 30 years, and I look back and what I wish I was better at way back when, and regardless of the industry, and it's a weird thing, it's having a better understanding of how personalities work together and fit in to each
Okay.
environment. I think watching in a crew environment or any leader of any organization, watching them have a disconnect and watching the company respond and watching the success of a company, going back to the leadership and the culture that they set, we don't pay much attention to that. Even within a base, every base would have a different culture. And at the time, I just knew I didn't like flying out of certain bases. And like, I look back now, it's because they set a tone, and that tone affects the happiness level of the people around you. So like my first trip down to Dallas, I remember we were getting pushed back and we hadn't run any checklists yet. And the captain's like, well, this isn't my first rodeo, but I'm thinking, well, this is my first rodeo, so I'm still going to call it out. And so the cockpit voice recorder has me saying it because, and I just remember I hated that. People going off the rules, but in the same breath, this captain was so good, he could land anywhere. I would fly anywhere with him. So just paying a little bit more attention to those surroundings and why people respond the way they do, I think is so important for any industry.
Okay, excellent. I would totally agree with that. Finally, where can listeners go to connect with you, perhaps get your book, and learn more about the work that you're doing at Advanced Aircrew Academy?
Yeah, you can, I'm on Amazon. You can email me directly. I'm
Okay, and
Erika. Yep,
okay,
Erika at achickinthecockpit.com. The
okay,
best place to find me is on LinkedIn. That's where
okay,
most of my followers are.
fantastic. Erika, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your wonderful, diverse, powerful story from the first day at a small airport at Flying Cloud, which is where I learned, took my first flying lesson, to flying the Boeing 727 and becoming one of the most visible voices in aviation today. To our listeners, if you want to follow Erika's work, please visit the Advanced Aircrew Academy or go to her LinkedIn profile. And in terms of picking up her book, A Chick in the Cockpit, it's all on Amazon. All the links will be in the show notes right behind or right below this episode. And if you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to subscribe, leave a rating, and give us a thumbs up with a great review, and never miss another episode of Jet Setting Wealth Advisory. Thank you for listening, and we will see you next time.